Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take my time to react to the testimony already given. The three pillars that each of the witnesses and the Secretary highlighted. Pillar number one, restore the warrior ethos. You know, I've had the privilege in this committee to see firsthand a special window of our troops, their courage, their tenacity, their commitment. You don't have to restore the warrior ethos, sir. It's already there. We've never lost it. Pillar two, I just want to highlight something that is a concern. Pillar two is the border security issue. And among that, I'm really worried about the agreement with El Salvador that exists. I think it's very cloudy. We don't know exactly what they're getting in return for their commitment to house the hellhole prisons, in the hellhole prisons they have, people that are shipped there, transported there illegally.
The agreement between the United States and El Salvador involving the use of harsh detention facilities is deeply troubling and riddled with legal and ethical concerns. At the core of this issue is the decision to transfer detainees to what have been described as hellhole prisons in El Salvador, where basic human rights and due process are questionable at best. These prisons are being used to house individuals who are allegedly transported there illegally, raising serious concerns about the legality and transparency of the entire operation. This arrangement appears to violate multiple U.S. laws and international norms, starting with the Constitution itself, which safeguards against cruel and unusual punishment and ensures legal rights for individuals regardless of where they are detained. Furthermore, this agreement directly undermines the spirit and letter of the First Step Act, a criminal justice reform bill that was heavily promoted by former President Trump and his son-in-law Jared Kushner during Trump's first term. That act was meant to improve conditions within the criminal justice system, reduce recidivism, and promote rehabilitation over harsh punishment. Sending detainees to dangerous and inhumane facilities abroad runs counter to everything the First Step Act was intended to represent. By engaging in such practices.
But there's problems with that. It violates the Constitution, number one. It violates the First Step Act that President Trump paraded around and took so much credit for in his first term, he and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. It violates the Leahy Law, which prohibits federal money to be used for prisons of that type. It violates the Foreign Assistance and Transparency and Accountability Act that our Secretary of State was a proud sponsor of, that demands taxpayer accountability for monies, because all we know is the White House has said they've given El Salvador, given their strongman, Bukele, $6 million. But then they're holding another $15 million in international narcotics and control and law enforcement to the side for prospective use here. And of concern, too, is we're now transferring helicopters, military assets, to Bukele.
Failing to support Ukraine in its war against Russian aggression is not just a regional issue. It's a global strategic failure that directly undermines the strength and credibility of the United States and its allies. Every major security expert has repeatedly emphasized that continued support for Ukraine serves as a powerful deterrent against future aggression from authoritarian regimes like China and Russia. If Ukraine is defeated, it signals to these nations that the West lacks the will and unity to defend its democratic allies. That, in turn, could embolden China to pursue its own expansionist goals, particularly in Taiwan and the South China Sea. Confident that the United States and its partners may not respond decisively. What makes this situation especially critical is that the United States is not standing alone. It has built and maintained a coalition of over 50 nations who are united in their support for Ukraine. This multinational alliance is unprecedented in modern times and represents a form of strength that neither Russia nor China possesses. Unlike the Cold War era, where military alliances were more symbolic than operational, today's coalition is actively providing military aid, humanitarian assistance, and economic support. This kind of unified global action is one of the greatest strategic advantages the U.S. has undermining it by questioning the legitimacy or value of that support weakens not only Ukraine's chances of survival, but also the very alliance structure that keeps adversaries in check.
You've attacked that alliance. You said they're pathetic. You called them freeloaders. They have paid, and we want more money, and they're giving more money for their own defense, but they've given $199 billion towards Ukraine, more than the U.S., by the way. And they're not freeloaders when they came to our assistance at 9/11. They suffered thousands of casualties, several hundred deaths. They're young men and women sacrificed to defend Article 5, the only time it was exercised for the United States. They're not freeloaders. They're dealing with that. And yet today, you attacked one of them saying that now you've confirmed that the U.S. has plans in place to invade the territory of a founding member of NATO, Denmark. That's not being strong. That's not being strong. It's also chaotic. This is the chaos cabinet when it comes to Ukraine. Secretary of the Treasury, Putin is a war criminal.
It sends a message of chaos, not confidence. Allies grow uncertain, adversaries grow bold, and the world begins to question whether the United States can be trusted to lead with clarity and conviction. The contradictions are stark. On one hand, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff have consistently labeled Russia the aggressor in the war against Ukraine. They emphasize that Putin initiated an unprovoked invasion, violating international law and threatening European stability. However, these declarations are undermined when other influential figures, including the former president and his close allies, contradict these positions. Some have publicly claimed that Ukraine was the real aggressor or that Putin isn't such a bad guy, effectively blurring the line between aggressor and victim. This kind of rhetorical flopping weakens the country's stance, emboldens enemies, and sows doubt among allies who expect consistency in times of global crisis. The confusion doesn't stop there. At one point, the Treasury Secretary called Putin a war criminal, an important designation that implies accountability and international legal consequences. Yet shortly after, a different message emerged from key figures who walked back that label or expressed a surprising level of trust in the Russian leader. These opposing narratives create a climate of uncertainty, which makes coherent strategy nearly impossible. One moment Putin is condemned, the next he's rationalized. One moment Russia is an existential threat, the next there's talk of withdrawing support for Ukraine entirely. This erratic messaging undermines efforts to build consensus, both at home and abroad. The disarray has reached such an extreme that wild and unfounded claims have emerged. Such as the idea that the United States has plans to invade Denmark, a founding member of NATO. Statements like this are not just absurd, they are dangerous. They erode trust in American leadership and feed into propaganda efforts by authoritarian regimes who want to depict the U.S. as unstable or unhinged. When government leaders and their representatives speak without alignment, the resulting vacuum invites manipulation, misinformation, and strategic miscalculation on a global scale.
Trump's chief negotiator, Putin is trustworthy. He's not a bad guy. Secretary of State, Putin was a war criminal, I guess, but now he's not. He doesn't know. Trump says Ukraine was the aggressor. The Secretary of State says Russia was the aggressor. You, sir, the Secretary of Defense, said Russia was the aggressor. The chair of Joint Chiefs said yesterday that Putin would even stop at Ukraine. The Trump ambassador resigned because of this policy, and I think Vice President Vance said it best. He said he doesn't care what happens to Ukraine one way or the other. That is not strength. That is not using our coalition. That is not deterrence. You're wrong on all your pillars. I yield back.
Gentleman yields.